We're in Glenville, North Carolina today. We're doing an impromptu site walk of a modified Pleasant View. Chris is the one that built the house, and he's going to explain a little bit what we had to deal with some of the HOA restrictions.
So while we're standing out here in the road, a couple things that we had to deal with. This HOA has a 25-foot setback off of any property line, and this lot is also has a lakefront, as you can see down below us. So we also had a setback to meet off of that lake. So we actually had to take one of our plans, the Pleasant View, and shrink the width of it down by some feet to make it fit on the lot with the septic and stay back off of the road. So when we first showed up to this lot, it looked very similar to what you're seeing behind me here. We had a lot of old growth pines that were about 100 or so feet tall. We took down about 40 trees on this lot and had to haul them out. So that was something that we had to set the expectation to our homeowner on the front end and make sure we had our site numbers in line to cover those costs. All right, so now we're down here on site. This corner of the porch right here is the closest corner to the property line. And what we had to do in order to make this house fit, we actually had to get a variance from the homeowners association. And what we had to do was we moved the house about 3 feet closer to the road than they allow. And the reason for that is if we move down this way, you can see there's a flag right here on the stake. That is actually the top edge of our septic tank. And it has to be a minimum of 5 feet off of any part of the foundation of the house. And below that tank, we've got 2 drain lines, and the upper drain line is only about 3 feet above what's allowed by the lake right away. So this site's really tight. It took a lot of planning and the modification of a plan, as we mentioned before, to get this to work out for our homeowner. Another thing that we look for when we come out to a site is power. So it takes power to run a house, it takes power to build a house. So behind me, you can see our temp pole that we set up on every job. Some of them will be an overhead pole like this one here. Some of them will be underground, just depending on your specific site. We were very fortunate to have a pole right above us with a transformer on it. So all we had to do once the account was set up with the power company was set this pole, and then they come out and hook it up, and we've got power in a couple days. As soon as the electrician gets done roughing in this house, over here on this corner, we will have our power meter base. It's the closest point to the pole or the source of power, and it's also hidden out of the way so you don't see it from the front side of your house. So just as soon as that meter goes on, we'll get a hold of the power company, and they'll come and trench in underground from their pole up there into our meter base. And what that allows us to do is as soon as we get light fixtures and the inside of the house safed up, we can go ahead and get power turned on and check everything out before we're ever done with the house and make sure everything's working. So from a grading aspect, once we got all the trees cut off and the stumps out, this lot also had some challenges. As you can see behind me, we've got a cut bank. The bank itself is about 9 feet tall. At this back corner of the house, we cut down 5 feet of elevation. And if you walk with me and look this way, if you can imagine what this looked like when we started, it was just a sloping lot. And we had about 20 feet of fall from the back corner of the house to the front corner. So what we did is we cut this down 5 feet up here. Underneath this porch here, you can see we've got some poured wall coming up out of the ground. That poured wall actually goes down in the ground another 5 or 6 feet to get to natural ground for the footers. And then what we did to save the homeowner some money on poured wall is we stepped it down right here and did what we call a pony wall across, and all that'll be sided. It's about half the cost of doing a actual poured wall, so he was able to save quite a bit of money by doing that. So with this particular site, you can see the lake below us there in the previous shot. This lake is at 3,500 feet in elevation, so any house above this lake level is in a 140 mile an hour wind zone in the state of North Carolina. And we talked about the site requirements as far as setbacks off the lake. As you can see, this house is actually sitting quite a few feet back, and that's due to the power company that owns the lake. They have a right-of-way so far back off the lake, and then we had to get our septic and everything in below it, as we explained before. With this house being in a high wind zone, there's some special requirements that we have to do above what you would see on a normal house. One is the poured wall foundation. If you'll notice, there's no block. It's actually a solid poured wall. And the reason for that is we have to have additional reinforcing that comes up from the footer all the way up through the wall. And when we go inside the crawl space in a minute, you'll be able to see we do a double seal plate, and we have a special square washer that we have to use in order to tie the house. So basically the house has to be tied from the roof all the way down through the foundation into the footing continuously. All right, so now that we're inside the crawl space, bear with us on our lighting. It's a little dark in here. But I was mentioning the anchoring requirements for the high wind zone. So as you can see down here, On a normal house, you've only got one sill plate. Well, here we've actually got a double sill plate and this 2-inch square washer that's required to meet that wind zone bracing requirement. And the pony walls that we mentioned earlier, as you can see here, we've got a poured wall that stops right here. We could have continued this poured wall all the way around the house and done the same thing, but what we did is we stepped it down 7 foot here and framed it with wood, and we'll do siding on the outside. And the whole reason for that was to save the homeowner some cost on this foundation that's already, as you can see, pretty extravagant. So we're able to work with people and, you know, within the limits of the code to do what we can to try to save them as much money as possible. So another thing that's different in this crawl space for a high wind zone that you wouldn't see in a normal house are these 6x6 posts. So with a poured wall, we don't have a block mason up here to lay block piers. So what we're able to do is we can use a 6x6 post to support the girders that hold the house up. On the bottom and top of these posts, you'll see an L bracket. That is a required connection to meet the wind zone requirement, keeps the uplift and the post from shifting. Also on this house, the HVAC system is in the crawl space as well. The reason for that is we've got a vault that runs all the way through the middle of this house, and it's difficult to duct HVAC across that vault and get it to operate efficiently. So some things to consider when we're talking about that we'll look at upstairs are placement of your supplies to keep them out of the way in the floor, and very importantly, the placement of your returns where they can actually end up to not, we try to keep them out of the floor if we do have to put it in the crawl space, because nobody likes stepping on a grill or changing a filter out in the floor. So another unique feature to this house is underneath this deck that you're looking at is actually going to be a carport at the end of the job. So some things that we had to consider in order to make this work out. Number one was the height of our foundation. So we had to be tall enough at this corner in order to drive a vehicle under this carport when we were done. And with the grade and slope that we had, we didn't really have an issue doing that. This deck, as you may can tell in the picture, actually has 2x12 joist underneath it. And the reason for that is so we could span this 16-foot distance off the house and eliminate a post right here that would normally hold up the roof line. We've also got a set of stairs that's going to be going in that comes down from the deck above. Once this carport grade is finished out, we'll have a place to land those stairs on and tie it all in.